Hello, I'm David Gibbons. Thanks for joining me. I met Ray Stasieczko 4 years ago and we travelled to Egypt, to Mexico and to China. He shared key information the global imaging supplies industry needs to know, if they want to survive, that is, beyond the next 5 to 10 years. Stasieczko is the founding CEO of Tesra, the innovation channel, and is also the host of the End of the Day with Ray TV show. Based in the United States, he has called the imaging channel home for nearly 30 years. He is well known, having contributed more than 100 articles in industry publications. Stasieczko has also spoken at events right across America. He accurately predicted the Staples DEX acquisition, and when he spoke in China in 2017, he shared his thoughts on HP buying Xerox. Many in attendance could not comprehend that message. However, it appears he was onto something given what we saw going on between HP and Xerox in 2019. Stasieczko has become the father of what has quickly become the A4 revolution. He warns of the disruptions that threaten the industry. Some say he is a disruption. In any case, he continues to challenge the status quo. And you can watch his daily TV program End of the Day with Ray, which is posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, where he now has 20,000 followers. Go to LinkedIn to find Ray Stasieczko. Well, we're very honoured that he has agreed to speak virtually to our audience at Remax World Summit and to the global audience as well.
Hello, my friends. My name is Ray Stasieczko. David Gibbons, I want to thank you for allowing me to participate in your summit this year. I wish I could be there in person. You know, when I get a chance to talk to my friends in what I describe as the document imaging channel, the industry that makes and sells and services copy machines and printers all over the world, I always start out with a quote from a gentleman who was born in the late 1400s. And in 1513, Niccolo Machiavelli said this: "There's nothing harder to take in hand, more peerless to conduct, more uncertain in its success, than to take the lead with the introduction of a new order of things. For the innovator has enemies, those who have done well under the old conditions, and lukewarm defenders in those who may do well under the new." Ladies and gentlemen, I got to say that last part again because it's so important for my friends in the imaging channel space. For the innovator has enemies, those who have done well under the old conditions, and lukewarm defenders in those who may do well under the new. And ladies and gentlemen, it's those lukewarm defenders that really impede innovation of an industry in disruption. You know, over the last year, we've seen the world in this pandemic. We've seen the world shift to a remote workforce. And when that shift happened, the very first time in our industry's history, our customers became aware that print equipment isn't quite as important as they thought it might have been. And it's in that awareness that sparks innovation. Not only innovation from within, but innovation from without. And anytime your customers decide to take a different path, the industry has to be on that path with them, or they will in fact collapse. Earlier this year, I wrote an article. I published it on LinkedIn. And the premise of the article was this. You know, the automobile was invented in the late 1800s. And it took a long time to get that automobile up and running and going before it was filling up the streets. But you know what? What if this happened? Imagine, if you will, with me, that in the early 1900s, there was a horse pandemic and all the horses had to be quarantined. And all the horses had to be quarantined, so the people still had to get from point A to point B, but they didn't have their horse anymore. The automobile was there, but maybe they were procrastinating that automobile. Maybe they didn't have the money to buy that automobile, but they're forced into it. They got to do it. They buy the automobile. And let's just say a year later, the pandemic for the horses is over and all the horses are released from the barns. Do we honestly believe that the people that got the car are going to trade that car in and get back on their horse? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's where our industry is today. Our users, for the very first time, got an awareness. Not only an awareness that they don't need to print as much, but an awareness that there's other ways to do business without printing the page. Organizations like DocuSign, explosive growth. Think about that. How many applications have been moved to the cloud? How many people are moving documents between each other and keeping them behind glass? More and more, my friends, more and more. We talk about workflows in our industries. You know what workflow, the biggest disruption to workflow is simple, folks. It's to have to stop and scan something or print it. That's a disruption to workflow. People try to eliminate disruptions. I'm not saying that we're never going to print anymore. I'm not saying that you're not going to put supplies in those printers. But what I'm saying is this. The volumes are going to decline. They're going to decline massively. Not only are the volumes going to decline, but the way we deliver the equipment to the end user is going to change, and it's going to change drastically. There's whole industries out there built around delivering the big A3 copy machines to end users. A whole industry. We call it the BTA style channel. Ladies and gentlemen, delivering A3s to end users in offices where the offices are closed or the offices aren't going to have as many people there is probably not a reality in the very, very near future. But the A4 MFP is. There should be tremendous growth in the A4 MFP. That's why I started the A4 revolution with my friends at Lexmark in Boston in 2018. In 2018, as I looked at the data and I saw the massive declines that were already happening, as I realized there was millions of A3s in the marketplace that were producing volumes less than 5,000 pages a month, I knew we were overspeccing and we were overselling as an industry. And the end users would soon be aware that they don't need to be oversold, and they would buy an A4. Well, guess what? That A4 revolution, it's on fire. Everybody's talking about A4, and they're talking about A4 because they realize, just like the end users, that the future of A3 isn't really promising. Now, I know there's some manufacturers out there that continue to talk about how they're going to disrupt a $55 billion A3 industry. I think that's delusion. I've talked about that a couple of times on the End of the Day with Ray. But ladies and gentlemen, the consolidation of the manufacturers has to happen. The work from home, the remote worker is a big impact. But first, before I talk about the consolidation, I want to talk about this work from home thing. Because this work from home thing is making our industry appear to be totally insane from the outsiders looking in. First, let me clarify something. People have had printers in their houses for decades, since the printer was invented. Maybe it took a few years before we put them in their houses, but you know what I mean? Printers have been in people's houses for a long, long time. People have been printing in their houses for a long, long time. But you know what people don't do? They don't print a lot in their houses. And quit looking at these one-offs. Quit listening to someone that's got some kids at home and they're printing all kinds of stuff off, because you know what? That'll change too. Look at the workflows. Look at the person in their home that's working for a company and really ask yourself, what are they printing and why are they printing it? Do we really believe that this crisis caused these workers all this anguish? That they're sitting in their home offices and they're scratching their head and they're saying, oh man, I wish I could print. I wish I had a better color MFP. Oh, I need to scan all these documents. Folks, they're not saying that because they haven't been saying that for the last decade at least. The work from home movement is nothing new. In 2017, I wrote about the work from home movement. And I even titled that article, Don't Let Amazon Have All the Fun. And I was warning my friends that deliver equipment to businesses all over the world that you better start talking to those businesses and asking those businesses what their strategy is for the remote worker of the future. Boy, I wish a lot of them would have taken that advice, because here we are in a global pandemic and the remote worker is a reality in a massive way. And you know, I was talking to a couple of manufacturers, you know, some executives within these manufacturers, and they were trying to focus and try to figure out how many people were going to stay home versus how many people were going to stay in the office. And folks, that's not the argument our channel needs to have. That's not the argument that's going to determine how we're going to sell or what we're going to sell. The argument we need to be paying attention to is if an organization puts 5% of their people at home, or if an organization puts 90% of their people at home. What the organization's going to do, it's going to change its processes to accommodate remote workers. It's not about their home. It's about a remote workforce. What's the first thing that has to go away with a remote workforce? Well, one of the first things is having the need to have to print off documents. If you're remote, you're remote. I want to pick up my iPhone. I want to move documents from my iPhone to the person I'm talking to's iPhone. That's what it's about, folks. Hey, Bill, Sam, or Betty, we're having a conversation. I want to move my information to you. The old days, here's my proposal. The new days, I'll text it to you. I'll email it to you. You want it as a PDF? You want me to put it in Dropbox? Ladies and gentlemen, we can move documents in the digital landscape. We don't need to print them. So let's talk about the work from home and where the opportunity is. Because there is an opportunity, because I just said people have been printing at home forever. People have printers in their houses. The opportunity is going to be the manufacturer that could deliver a printer in somebody's house cheaper than somebody else. I hate to say that word cheaper, but that's the reality. Do you honestly believe that people are sitting at home going through specs of printers like they are their car? Like they are a refrigerator? It's a printer. They all do the same thing for the most part. Some of them are MFPs, some of them are printers, some of them are black and white, some of them are color. Ladies and gentlemen, our industry believes we're a lot more complicated to the end user than the end user realizes. That's always a problem. That misalignment in aspirations between the product and the customer could be detrimental to any industry. So as we look at this work from home movement, let's quit polling companies and polling home workers and asking them questions that try to reinforce what we want reinforced. The difference between an analyst and a visionary is simple. The analysts, they look at the past and they try to project the past and the future. And a visionary looks at the future, and what they see in the future, they try to deliver to the present. That's the difference. That's the difference, folks. And we see a whole lot of analysts out there projecting. Remember this? Managed print services will be a $50 billion business. I mean, the number kept going up. It was purely insane. All these analysts talking about managed print services in the year 2025. I'm sure all those analysts right now are refiguring out the number. I'm sure all those analysts are starting to realize that in 2025 it probably won't be called managed print services. It'll probably be called digital workflow services. Who knows? But it's not going to be about counting pages printed. It's going to be about information moving around in a digital landscape. Those are tough things to say to an industry that manufactures printers and its supplies and its parts. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to start waking up to the realities of the market around us. Why are we investing and doubling down and trying to throw a bunch of apps on A3 copy machines? Think about it. We're trying to build relationships up with products where customers are only using those products till they don't need to use them anymore. They're not using them because it's fun. They're not going to the office, gathering around the water cooler talking about how they can't wait to get to the A3 MFP in the hallway because there's a new app on it. Man, I don't know about you guys, but I got to get out there. That machine's always got people in front of it. I'm trying to use the new fancy app. I haven't been able to do it yet. Folks, that shit ain't happening. It's not. Regardless of what the manufacturers think, they need to pay attention. They need to pay attention to the realities of their customers and start building products around those realities. Why aren't we doubling down and making A4 even lower cost to service and support? It's already much lower than the A3. Let's make it lower. Let's make it easier for the end user to just buy one of those things, get it delivered to their house, pull it out of the box, put it on a shelf, have it automatically connect to their network. Oh, that already exists. You see what I'm saying, folks? We're making things to try to save things instead of creating things to try to reinvent things. And that's a big difference. That's the first sign that an industry is in trouble, when they keep trying to, save the past. I talked about the horse and the automobile. Think about this analogy. We've all heard the story about Blockbuster and Netflix. Remember the Netflix guys meeting with Blockbuster, and Blockbuster sitting there saying to themselves, and Netflix, we don't think that subscription model, no one wants to do that. They want to come into the store. They want to get some popcorn from our popcorn machine. They want to, talk to their neighbors. They're never going to buy into that subscription model. Well, could you imagine, if you could go back in time and right after that conversation happened, there was a global pandemic? And all of a sudden everybody was stuck in their house. And all the Blockbuster stores had to close because nobody was really going to them because they were all stuck in their house. Do you think that they would have picked the phone up and called up Netflix and says, hey, about that subscription thing you were talking about, maybe that's not a bad idea. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to start thinking about all the good ideas that have come from this pandemic. And then we got to start thinking about all the threats to all the industries that this pandemic caused. When Sears and Kmart got together, the two big retailers in the U.S., remember those two big giants? They were doing not really well on their own. They decided to come together. Nothing worse than two, dysfunctional organizations coming together, creating one big dysfunctional organization. But when they came together, I penned this quote: a company becomes obsolete when they focus on delivering the past to the future instead of delivering the future to the present. Would it have not made more sense for Sears to buy a software company and figure out how to amplify, a digital presence? I believe wholeheartedly that customer experience, for no matter what industry you're in or what product you deliver, customer experience is found in the intersection that I describe between the digital and physical world. That's where customer experience lives. And whether our industry, the automobile industry, any industry, has to figure out how they can navigate between that digital and physical world profitably. How does the print industry navigate inside that intersection between that digital and physical world? What products do they bring to market to help end users have a better experience from the experiences they're getting today? Because you know what innovators look for? They look for all the things the old ways doing wrong. That's what they do. They sit around and they look and they say, wow, that is really a bad way to do things. We could do that so much better. And once they describe, the prescription of doing it better, they set out on a path to educate the customer on that better way. And they take away all these great relationships that status quo companies hung on to, that took advantage of, and they deliver those customers a better experience. That's what innovators do. They always do that. And ladies and gentlemen, there's a guy named Elon Musk, we all know him, Tesla Automotive, the battery car guy. Well, he has a thing and he says some people don't like change, but you need to embrace change if the alternative is disaster. First thing we have to do is accept that if we don't do anything, we're headed for disaster. The next thing we have to do is accept that we have to change. But here's the problem. I don't believe going forward, no matter what business you're in the world we live in today, change management has to be replaced with what I call modification management. Change management comes too late. It's a reaction. It's a reaction to something you didn't do. Modification management is a continuous process. Think about it this way. Change management is surgery after the heart attack. Modification management is eating the right foods, doing the right exercises, preventing the heart attack from ever even happening. Niccolo Machiavelli also said this. He said the princes of his day did not lose their power through misfortune. The princes of his day lost their power through indecisiveness and inaction. It will take decisive action to move from near obsolescence to continuous relevance. It will take bold action to move from near obsolescence to continued relevance. Bold leadership, folks. You can't do it with lukewarm defenders of innovation. With those lukewarm defenders sitting on the sidelines, hiding under their desk, afraid to speak up, afraid to challenge the status quo, hoping that the tenure of yesterday hangs around a little bit longer. We got to get those people out of the way. It's sad, but true. And as this industry starts to consolidate, the pain of that consolidation will be tremendous for the lukewarm innovators, for the lukewarm. Oh man, the lukewarm, they're in trouble. Those who have done well under the old conditions, well, they're going to find out that they better start figuring out how to modify to the new conditions. Because the new conditions are coming, regardless of how much we want to keep current circumstances alive. The new way's coming. But manufacturers out there, when they buy each other up or they merge with each other, they got to even change it beyond that. I did a video not too long ago on one of my End of the Day with Ray series videos, and I talked about how Konica and Xerox should come together. Remember, I'm the guy that said in 2017, actually at this summit in 2017, that HP should go buy Xerox. And I gave an argument for that. Obviously, HP, I don't know what exactly HP's thinking and what they have been thinking, but they didn't do that. Xerox actually went after them, and I was very, very bullish on that acquisition. I thought Xerox was on the right track. And now, obviously, that's not going to happen. But Xerox ain't going away. Xerox is a marketing company that sells and services and supports equipment, for the most part, that's manufactured by others. It had an agreement with Fuji. We all remember that. It only makes its production equipment. A lot of people are fooled. They think Xerox is a copier manufacturer. It's not. It's a manufacturer of a part of its product deliverable. But the majority of the machines that are in the field that Xerox service, supports, and supplies are made by others. And when you look at Xerox, and now if they looked at a Konica as an example, what do they get? They get a manufacturer, and they don't have to buy Konica. Maybe they just partner with them in kind of the format they did with Fuji. Why don't they just partner with them? They get the equipment they need to deliver into the marketplace. And here's the other thing they get. They get all of that Konica direct footprint now becomes a Xerox direct footprint. Xerox becomes the marketing arm for a Konica, if you will. That's the kind of things we got to start thinking about. You know, I published that in an article and I got some comments back, and one of them was this: what makes you think that a Japanese company is going to sell to an American company? And my answer to him was, well, a global pandemic, massive declines, 20% reductions in revenue makes for strange bedfellows. All the industry's people, regardless what sector you're from, if you believe that nothing's going to change, you're nuts. There will be tremendous amounts of changes. And you can't go back to the way it used to be or think about why things didn't work. We have to start thinking about how things will work. It's so easy to think about how things won't work. I remember when I started the A4 revolution with my friends at Lexmark in Boston in 2018. I'm out there preaching to the world, stop overspeccing and overselling A3s. Customers don't need those big giant devices. I was looking at data, realizing that there was millions of A3 copy machines across the world that were running less than 5,000 pages a month. That's a perfect recipe for disaster from an outside innovator coming in and taking away all those great relationships and delivering those customers a better experience, an A4 experience. But when I was talking about this in 2017, and 2018, and 2019, I would get bombarded from executives, from salespeople, on all the reasons why this wouldn't work. They would talk about how salespeople, weren't commissioned right to be able to sell A4. How manufacturers couldn't just, get rid of all that revenue if they switched from A3 to A4 because the A4s are cheaper. Well, guess what? They just lost 20-30% of their revenue. Maybe they should have switched prior. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have control. We don't have control over holding back relevance. Nobody does. Progress always wins. Anytime you try to hold back relevance, well, you end up in obsolescence. That's where you end up. We need to start thinking about what could happen. What could happen based on why it should happen. And when we start thinking that way, we get creative. When we start thinking about how a Xerox and Konica could come together profitably, hitting home runs all over the park, it'll spark imaginations. It's easy to sit there and write down all the reasons it won't work. It's easy to hire some analyst to go out there and ask questions to get the answers to insinuate that wouldn't work. That's what a lot of these analysts are doing. Gosh, I look at some of the reports I see out there and I want to cringe. I saw a report recently, and these are good analysts. I'm not trying to make fun of the analysts. I'm just trying to tell you that analysts, at the end of the day, for the most part, aren't visionaries. They're not. They try to figure out how we're going to do what we're doing now in the future. They're not trying to figure out what the future's doing and helping us bring that to the present. But when I see, articles written about how if a company pays for the worker's device in their home, they'll print more. Do you realize how silly that sounds? Come on, folks. A company, if they pay for the device in the person's house, they're going to print more. What does that even mean? How do you come up with that conclusion? People are going to print what they need to print, whether it's in their house or whether it's in the job. They're not just going to make stuff up to print. And here's the other question. This work from home thing, I got to be honest, I've done a couple of videos on this. It's just driving me out of my mind when I hear people talking about this because they're taking it to extremes that are insanity. People are not going to put DCA tools on their home printers. It's not going to happen. Mom and dad are not going to sit around the kitchen table with pie charts and start yelling at the kids on what they printed at home. And how come they're printing on mom or dad's printer? They're printing coloring book pages. They shouldn't be doing that. They're only allowed to print on Saturday. Betty can only print on Sunday. You think that's going to happen? You're nuts. It's not. People are going to print at home like they have for the last 15 years, and they're going to buy toner when they need it. The opportunity for what I call the BTA channel, or those dealers that sell equipment to offices, is to go to those offices and come up with programs that allow those workers to buy sub $200, $300 printers in a digital platform so they could get them delivered to their house. They could be set up without anybody interfering with them, and they could supply them toner when they need it. Folks, it's not about dragging print management to the future of the home office. The home office is like the escape of print management. Not to mention that print management wasn't very successful in the SMB space since its birth 20 years ago. Print management was designed for the enterprise space. The enterprise space, folks. That's where it was designed for. Today, if you look inside the imaging channel, that dealer space, those BTA-style dealers that sell and service copy machines to customers all over the world, for every machine that's on a contract, there's between 5 and 7 that aren't. If you look in those DCA tools, you'll see it. They're all there. They're all there. The only problem is those dealers that have the one that's contracted isn't supplying or selling any of them. They're buying them from Amazon. They're buying supplies from Amazon. They're buying supplies from office products resellers. Good for the industry that sells supplies. Good for the industry that manufactures equipment. Not good for those resellers that sell business to business. So the industry is going to have some shifts in the dynamics of its distribution. As more and more of these manufacturers start coming together, and as more and more of these manufacturers start looking outside the borders of the industry itself and bringing other folks in to play with them, maybe a manufacturer does a deal with a company called Salesforce. Think about that. Maybe a manufacturer does a deal with a company like Microsoft. Think about that. Or Google. Think about that. Why is that good? Could that happen? Should it happen? Ladies and gentlemen, we have got to be prepared. We got to learn how to modify along the way so that when the disruption really hits us hard, we're ready. We can react. We can respond. We need to be looking outside of our own borders. If you're a parts, provider for our industry, start thinking about how that looks in the future with less manufacturers. There could be some huge opportunities there, as a matter of fact. If you're a supply, making supplies, I said this back in 2017, the same time I talked about HP and Xerox getting together. I made a comment that the reman and new builds were arguing with each other in the customer's parking lot, the OEMs were going to go in those customers' offices and take away the business. And you know what they're doing? That's what they're doing. They're trying to take away the business. We've seen some of the things that HP has done by lowering their prices. I wouldn't be surprised if the OEMs start going to some new build companies to make their OEM toner. I wouldn't be surprised if the OEMs go to my friends even at Clover and say, hey, we want you to be our remanufacturing arm. Folks, there has to be a lot of consolidation. There has to be massive, massive changes in order to survive, in order to stay relevant. I want you all to think about the horse pandemic. Think about all these things that your end users got exposed to. And trust me, they don't want to run back. They don't want to run from progress. They want to run towards it. Think about the Netflix Blockbuster conversation. If the pandemic would have happened right after that, would Blockbuster have called back and said, oh yeah, we got to get into the subscription model? So ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot coming our way, but with bold, fearless leadership, we can prevail. We can succeed. We can change the game. Because everybody watching this, everybody who knows me, also knows this. Status quo is the killer of all that will be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo, and I look forward to seeing you all again next year. Have a fantastic 2021.